We're real honored to have Mushin here, aka Patric Roberts, and we've been very good friends with Patric. He's been a part of our life for many years, and he has been involved with Mokka, Satomi, and other issues, worked with Mellow Hill and also Wendell Yellow Bull, those of you that might know these people. And I thoroughly believe we can save the world in looking at our misuse of carbon and etc. And global warming. We can do a lot of cutting down, and he has become PowerPoint. Worked on it yesterday, and then Tony polished it up last night. And, we're ready to go. Here's he be the man. He just came back from Al Gore's speech. Lived in Denver for a long time, but now lives in D.C. His car is the one that's out there with the D.C. plates that say taxation without representation.
So good morning. I guess to start with, I'm very grateful for being here at the Ogallala College. My journey in life has been on the edges, not so much in the mainstream of academia at all. I've been an entrepreneur in Denver, and for the last 15 years, I've really focused my attention on the Lakota paradigm and cognitive science. And so I'm very interested in the biological environmental science. And I think that the first thing I'd like to do is give some context to where I'm standing, where I'm coming from. Hopefully by the end of this presentation and conversation today, I can enlist as an invitation for you to participate in this emerging climate reality project. I just attended 3 days in Denver with Al Gore. And no matter what you think of Al Gore, 11 years ago, when he created the movie Unintended Consequences, he really created a global conversation regarding climate change. And I am for the creation of a carbon fee dividend in 2017. I believe we need to put a price on the carbon, and I believe that that revenue needs to come back into the citizenry. Okay? So I'm telling you where I want to end up at the beginning, but let me give you some background of how I see the work that we've done, especially since 2007 in Mokka, Satomi, which is kind of like an institute of oral conversations, where we're seeing a lot of coherences and correlations between the Lakota paradigm and this distinction called Wo Lakota and autopoiesis. And autopoiesis is it comes out of the hard field of biology, and it is a new conversation explaining living systems. So I know this is all new material. It's not going to be in your current biology book. The first undergraduate textbook on this subject of autopoiesis was just published in 2014, and it's called The Systems View of Life, A View of Unity. And so I'm just going to give you a taste of it today, and then end up in the climate reality project. To me, Wo Lakota is dignity in living authentic conversations. It's really an oral, person-to-person social relation. It's not based in codification of knowledge. So the Lakota ancestry operated in real-time pure play in oral language in connection with the entire web of life and with the stars, your star knowledge. So life is like riding a bike. Does anyone in here know who said that? Albert Einstein. Today's his birthday.
Yeah, it is. It's 23rd birthday, too. It's my day.
Well, how appropriate then for me to bring up Albert because it's probably mine. So life is like riding a bike, and if you can imagine as a child, what he imagined was riding a light beam, and then he ended up creating an equation that today is literally the acceleration that we're experiencing in technology, where it's unbelievable what he discovered. And I don't want to dwell on that, but I want to say that Albert Einstein was very much outside of the academic world, that he was independent. He was a free thinker. And he came from a paradigm that was really his own thoughts as an observer that ended up creating the physics, the quantum dynamics that we experience today, that we're becoming aware of. So the secret to living is to keep moving, to maintain your balance. In other words, no matter what you're hitting, whatever you encounter in life, where you really fall down is when you stop pedaling. And that's what he's saying, is that you got to keep moving in your learning, you got to keep moving in your commitments and your activities. And this is a picture, this is my favorite picture actually, of my brother Mel Lonehill. And I took it in 2006 at the Little Bighorn ride. And so that's Mel on the bike. And that was my first ride. I had met Mel in 2004, and we became friends. And he said, you need to get back up on your horse and go riding with me. So I showed up. My mother died in May, and in June I went up and rode for the first time at Little Bighorn. And that was a initiation, to say the least. So I'm using this Lakota, and then I'm framing it inside of Albert's E equals MC squared, because each of us here right now are dynamic, complex, adaptable systems as human beings. For us to have this conversation in this meeting today, there's literally 10,000 million neurons that are operating in our central nervous system, and it's running on 25 watts, and the neocortex only weighs 3 pounds. And I'm telling you that there'll never, ever be a computer that we will be able to create that runs on 25 watts doing those types of computations instantly. So we are quantum beings. You know, we live in this Wakan, this mystery. And that's how Albert spoke about it too. He spoke about it as being the great mystery, which is very interesting to the American natives. So, because of that quantum dynamics, we are only alive in the moment. You're not alive a minute ago, and you're not the next moment. You're only alive one moment at a time. And then this is something that Mel brought to me, and that is that we are all stardust, and all cultures belong to this one Wakan structural determinism. Now, what do I mean by structural determinism, or what did Albert mean by structural determinism? That is that God, or the Creator, does not play dice. And that was his argument, is that from the beginning to this moment, that there is a structural determinism. And you see that structural determinism in the rotation of the moon around the Earth. You see it in the solar system. You see it in your daily lives. If all of a sudden structural determinism was broken in this moment, in this room, something really, you know, an alien showed up, we would be like, wow. We would wonder what's going on. And so we are dependent on structural determinism. And the beauty is that the structural determinism does not have chaos. The structural determinism knows where it's going. So this great mystery that we're a part of actually has some direction. And if you look, or if you observe around you in the web of life, you see this structural determinism occurring everywhere. Okay, we are human observers making distinctions that make a difference in a network of historic conversations in an evolutionary drift for our shared human concerns. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm meeting here with you today, is that I believe that I can offer you a distinction that makes a difference in this historic conversation that we're in. All of us are a part of it right now. And it's about our human concerns. It's about how do I survive? How do I thrive? How do I create a future for myself and with others? And so this languaging, person to person, P to P, is our ancient oral teeth and claws in modern conversations, taking action in creating families, societies, and a world together as global citizens. So we humans today passionately desire unity in this moment of truth, to live in a dignified manner of appreciative conversations as well Lakota. So what do you think of what that I just said?
I think it means we're all in this together, and we gotta join hands and work together, and instead of being so self-centered, it's gotta be a global unit. I don't know, what do you guys think?
Do you think about the word Lakota very much or not? So I can only give you my impression, but my impression has come through social relations And what I would say is that Woa Lakota is this oral covenant of peace and friendship. And it's regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless of beliefs. And that it's a hardwired part of who we are as human beings. And the gift of the Lakota is that, you know, you're still aware of your ancestry and how they lived. And it's really worth conserving that into your future. That's why I am a part of my Lakota conversations and family up here, is because I find it completely contradictory to the world that I was parachuted into, that pre-given understanding that was at my birth. Up here, there's something totally different going on, and it's based in Woa Lakota. It's based in this P2P dignity, this covenant of peace and friendship with one another, without power, without greed, without control. So that's my view. And then Woa Lakota manner of living is an oral P2P covenant of peace and friendship with all our relations in the surrounding universe. So that is even the bigger picture where, you know, when Albert Whitehat first introduced me to the term Mokka Satomi, one of the first things he said was, in the Lakota language, there is no word for animal, there's no word for goodbye, and there's no profanity. Well, that's a shocking thing to hear of an oral language that is over 10,000 years old, and it's been a constant reflection of mine ever since in regards to really understanding when the Lakota say all my relations, they aren't just talking about human beings, they're talking about the entire web of life, including the stars and the universe. So, you know, that's a huge, you know, I mean, it makes me very curious, and it sets off my imagination. And, you know, I've never been, you know, what can I say? I like living there versus what I'm going to show you in a minute in regards to the outside world that surrounds you. So autopoiesis, this is a picture of Sinte Gillespie's cultural center that they built over there. And the reason why I want to show it to you is because part of what they wanted to bring to the Lakota studies, cultural studies, was the star knowledge. And so it was designed so that they could be looking at the stars at night, and with a viewing room and everything. So when you get into this hardwired biology and this term autopoiesis, the best way that I can show you is to have a little exercise here right now. Who's the smartest one in the class? Jesse.
I never replayed it. I know.
Will you play with me, Jess? Do you have a dog? Who has a dog?
She doesn't want it.
Well, let's use you. And I forget your name. Larissa. So Larissa, and what's your dog's name?
Luca?
Luca?
Yeah.
Okay. So Larissa is a closed biological system. meaning that the largest organ in her body is her skin. And that contains a central nervous system. And Luca, what kind of dog is it?
He's a standard poodle.
Okay, a standard poodle. So it weighs what, 15 pounds or?
More like 50.
50. Oh, he's a big one. So he's a 50-pound poodle, and they're pretty intelligent. And but the same biological structure is in that dog as in Larissa. To the degree that at Johns Hopkins, when they performed the first heart surgery on a dog, the next morning they were able to perform the same heart surgery on an infant baby and save its life. So the biological systems are the DNA and the structure is almost identical. And both Larissa and Luca relate to an outside medium, and at some point both will end up dead. So my question, and this is a question that I want the class to answer, not myself, but what is it that Larissa does that Luca never does?
Thinks critically.
What?
Thinks critically.
Thinks critically. But how do you do that? So I'm going to be Socratic, and we're going to go down and get to what really makes a difference. I agree that the dog doesn't have the capacity to think critically. But what do you need to have to think critically? You know, what are we using right in the room right now? Brains. Well, the problem there is that the dog has a brain too. So it's not the brain. The question is what is it that Larissa does that Luca, if Luca did it today, it would be on the evening news. Huh? Speech. There you go.
But they talk to each other.
No. There's no doubt about it that that you have communication with the dog, right? But the dog is not able to articulate coordination of coordinations. For instance, to come to class today, right? It doesn't have a calendar. It doesn't have the language that we have. And it's very important to see that because we take language for granted.
Okay, language, but they have things that they coordinate, like with seasons. Look at their fur, you know, I think it real,
I understand.
okay, the biological.
The question that we're answering right now that was proposed in Appreciative Inquiry and Dialogue was simply, what is it that Larissa does that the dog never does? Okay, and then I'm going to use Adam and Eve here. And I'm going to use Tony and Misty. Let's say this is 8,000 BC. It's 2017. So, I'm using, when I first went over to Sente Gillespie University after getting involved with Albert Whitehat, and I was doing this presentation with Dwayne Hollowhorn's bear, and this is exactly what I showed him. And so if we understand and we share a biological universe with Luca, and for that matter, other living systems. But what makes Larissa different than anything else in the universe is that she lives in language, that she lives in a linguistic universe. Her identity is created in language. All of her coordinations of coordinations occur in language. Then the second thing I showed, because I was coming from my perspective, having been born into the Roman Catholic Church, and I say Adam and Eve, let's say it's 8,000 years ago the story started, but if I go out here to 2017, I still see in the culture the same pattern. The language pattern is still operating in 2017. And so I'm saying that language creates co-structured standard practices. But what he also pointed out was that the Lakota paradigm has a different story. So, of course, then I started getting into, well, what is the story of the Lakota? But I'm saying that that story of water coming from rock and on and on and on, and today I am deeply reflecting upon ectomia in regards to trickster and what is going on in politics. So I have this anchor that's different than in Western civilization right now. But I'm saying that this story is still operating out here in 2017. Does everybody see that? Okay. So then you have a world and co-structured communities, different languages, different customs, different traditions, and spread around. And then we created a communication structure that brought all this together. And what it created was chaos and distrust. And to move into the future, we have to create a new standard practice and I would say agreed upon standard practice as human beings that we can all agree upon. And I offer it's very simple, because profound things are simple. Simplicity is profundity. And that's what Einstein in E = mc squared, although he was dealing with complexity and field theory and all this stuff we're into today, his view was very simple. And what I'm offering you is a solution that is very simple. I request X by Y, and I promise X by Y. And that is when we start taking language seriously as constituting our identities and our coordination of coordinations, and building trust P2P in this manner of Lakota as peace and friendship. but our commitments start really meaning something. You know, we're taking action. We're not talking about the weather, we're doing something about the weather. So all of our ancestries emerged from Mother Earth, one womb. And we are all co-evolving a human conversation called humanity, building future generations as joyful concern, not in fear, not as a burden, but in living. I mean, in actually coming alive. And we are autopoietic, cognitive, virtual characters, only alive in the moment, disclosing new worlds. And I see that more with my relationships with what I would call the elder in the Lakota paradigm, because they really do disclose new worlds, man. And it's really, but to a certain degree, that's what's happening globally right now. And I believe that Lakota children could understand what's going on in science better than the universities out there. And then becoming autopoietic is a conscious decision to become responsible for what we say and owning what owns us in freedom, imagination, creativity, and surprise. Any conversation you want to have around this? Any questions? By the way, autopoiesis is a very simple distinction that they created in biology, and it simply means self-making, self-producing. So if you take a cell and a blade of grass, it's made up of a membrane and a metabolism. So in quantum dynamics, if we were to look inside of that one cell, you would see a furnace of coordinations going on in quantum dynamics, and all of that is occurring from inside. It's not coming from the outside. It's coming from the inside. So that's that structural determinism that I'm talking about. Okay, so this is one of the first pictures that was taken of the Earth. And, you know, when I was born, we didn't have this picture, you know. And it wasn't until, you know, the Apollo landing on the moon that they shot that first picture. So human activity and knowledge making is accelerating exponentially in globalization. Now, you can say, you know, we need to stop it, but it's kind of like being on an elevator, whether you're in science or in really any domain right now, where we're like on the first step of an escalator, and the escalator's moving. You can't stop the escalator. And so, you know, I could give a whole presentation just on that one point of not only the threats, but some of the unbelievable benefits that are at hand as well. And then the Western patriarchal culture's 2,500 plus year old assumptions, myths, and traditions are ending based on demands for obedience. You know, living in Washington, D.C., I get texts every single day right now to go to a protest. And, but the one, and I'm not a protester, I don't even like protesting, I like rather taking action, you know. So at any rate, I attended the Standing Rock march that they had from the Justice Department to Washington Monument. And in that process, I got to, I was up ahead, I was taking a couple pictures, and I, for the first time, got to hear Chase Iron Eyes from Standing Rock. And he was speaking of patriarchy on his phone. And afterwards I said, man, you gotta run for president. But we need to understand what patriarchal culture is in Western civilization. Patriarchal culture is about exclusion and appropriation. It's about domination and submission. It's about control and distrust. It's about discrimination in gender and race, and it's about war. It's about competition. It's the creation of poverty. Our poverty that we're experiencing in the world is coming from the patriarchal culture that is now operating a neoliberal capitalism, where the discussion this year, the political discussion, is the wealthy get more and the people at the bottom get less. And this isn't a new conversation. This has been going on for 2,500 plus years, and it's making us all sick, is my point of view. And so Lakota and autopsiesis is a new emergency story of our origin going back into the future where biology trumps politics. So I'm kind of saying structurally, in our structural determinism as human beings, we know that this is wrong. We know that it is inappropriate behavior, attitudes, behaviors, activities. And the way that we go into the future is by getting in contact with that root biology, that hard wood of where we come from, our ancestors. And I believe that in this biology of love, in autopoiesis that we've been working on for 40 years, is that we now know that human beings are loving creatures. And that is, you know, we each experience that in our families and as children. Yet we end up growing up in a political distinction of patriarchy, and it's not gendered. This is not about gender. This is not about, patriarchy is not about male domination. Because patriarchy was structured with the woman and the man. I don't know how they did it, but somehow this, we don't know how it got started, where this was exclusion and appropriation occurred. But we know that it's happening everywhere now. So all of our conversations are political. And we're not made as human beings to live in just the political domain. I'm not claiming that politics doesn't mean anything. I'm saying that as human beings, Lakota is much more important, you know, having a covenant of person to person of peace and friendship with one another. So Lakota Sovereignty in Action in 2017 is bringing forth a thriving Lakota language and culture. And that takes me to my next slide. It's really the invitation to join the Mokka Satomi Institute Global Learning Community. So Mokka Satomi Institute is primarily an oral P2P network of conversations operating in Manor, Lakota since 2007. And I have special thanks to great-great-grandmother Maria Randall and Albert Whitehat and Wilmer Mestis, because they were the ones that initially translated this notion of the order of Earth into Lakota Mokka Satomi. And it took me in a direction where my friends and associates started meeting around a campfire in the wilderness, and it was all oral. So we started really listening to the Lakota elders. And I tell you, when you start doing that, it's kind of like you're in awe. It's like you really quiet down. And then the Mokka Satomi Productions currently offered our 4 videos. In 2008, we produced the Lakota Ride Again. The Lakota Paradigm is on YouTube. It's 10 minutes, presented by John Gozen Center. And then there's Thoughts About the Lakota, Part 1 and Part 2, which is our dear friend Javier Levis from Monterrey, Mexico, who came and spent 10 days up here in 2013, and he went back and created keynote slide presentations of the Lakota situation as an endangered nation, and really shows where the culture is in regards to the politics that are going on and what's captured you. So our core prime moving team is multidisciplinary, global citizens committed to the Lakota Nation's sovereignty, global virtuous citizens, sovereignty in action, and the USA Congress enacting a carbon fee dividend in 2017. If we want to uplift the XL pipeline, whether it's the XL Keystone pipeline or the Standing Rock pipeline, if we want to uplift the conversation, what we need to do is the carbon fee dividend. Because basically it's putting the price of carbon at the wellhead or the mine starting at $40 a ton, going to $100. And it's returning that revenue back to the citizens, not into government programs, but directly back to you. And so that program would create, for an individual, approximately $500 every 3 months. For a family of 4, it would be $1,500 a month every quarter. So,
Wait, I have questions. How do they assess how much carbon and whose carbon is assessed? The carbon that you use, or industries, or?
okay, so carbon, it's not.
Because you said the carbon fee then
The carbon
would be
fee
$40 for.
per ton.
Per ton.
It's like increasing the price of gas, right?
Yeah, well, but I'm saying that when you bring up a ton of coal, okay, they can calculate specifically based on the coal too. I mean, there's different kinds of coal, but they know what the carbon content of that coal is.
So who pays it? Me as a consumer?
Everybody.
Okay.
Everybody pays.
They say this gets paid back in social programs, right? So
Well, I mean, if you were receiving $500 every quarter, $2,000 a year, what it actually does is it gives you, it puts you in a control position regarding your purchasing. And so it also allows the fossil fuel industry to start paying for the actual cost of what carbon is doing, you know. And so these behaviors over here of us individually, we now have finance to be able to change and make different decisions, whether it's improving the efficiency of your home or buying a hybrid car or electric car or whatever it is. But and that $40 would go on all the way up to $100 a ton. So at that point, that capital infusion into the citizenry is really the best way to change behavior. At the same time, you know, the fossil fuel industry, instead of being subsidized, ends up being paying their actual costs. So the new technologies coming in renewable energy actually start becoming more profitable. Does that make sense? And as a, you know, as a biological environmentalist, you know, this is right up your alley. You know, I'm saying that there's a whole lot of work here because there's like the reconfiguring of everything we're doing, right? And so the idea that we're going to get jobs out of coal and oil is just not true. You know, there's very few jobs there. The real jobs is in how do we start reconfiguring ourselves in this new secondary economy where I just purchased the Apple 7, you know, and I'm not a tech person, but I got to tell you, that thing has 265 gigabytes. And the whole NASA program probably didn't have that much computing power from, I'm talking from Houston, Texas, all the way to the moon and back. You know, I mean, this thing is like unbelievable. And so there's good things that are happening here in regards to lowering energy consumption and the way that we're starting to efficiently communicate and coordinate with one another that is really a secondary economy. It's no longer this primary economy. There's a hidden economy underneath here that is going to be 5 times the size of this economy because we're creators and who knows where we're going at the moment. But I think that there's a lot of, we're not going anywhere if we don't learn to really have reverence for Mother Earth, for the oceans, and for the web of life. I mean, we are in very hot water. And so here's my invitation, is that I would like, through Misty, to bring together people in the Oglala tribe here that would like to take a day and become competent with this climate reality project and be able to use the slides in the program. And they're very powerful material. So, you know, you can use it in classwork, but even more than that, it's about the conversation that we're in globally. And I believe that the Lakota have a part to play in it. So there's Misty's number and everything. All right, and then I had to put this picture in there. This is me at the XL Keystone Pipeline, and I'm there with, anyone know who that is? It's Neil Young. And Neil Young really had a great impact on me because I'm a veteran. I live at the Armed Forces Retirement Home, the Old Soldiers Home, on 280 acres. And I really, if you're ever coming, if you give me a call, I'd love to share our guest facilities, It's very inexpensive, $63 a night for 2 big queen-size beds. So, 4 people, that would be pretty inexpensive for Washington, D.C.
Neil Young is very Indian friendly too. He did several concerts as benefits back in the day up in Rapid City.
Yeah. Well, he had an impact on me when I was a soldier because I was stationed 23 miles away. I had a top secret clearance. I was a T1 operator in the Air Defense Command. And our unit was called up to go to Kent State University, and I refused to go. And so the 4 dead in Ohio really was like a PTSD experience for me. So in closing, here's the march I was at in Washington, D.C. And then I like this picture here of the last few days when Standing Rock showed up there. That's kind of a beautiful picture around the Washington Monument. So, to recap, I believe that the carbon fee dividend to U.S. citizenry in 2017 is really something that everyone in the world, especially over in Europe, would love to see Americans stand up and get accomplished, because it would make the biggest difference in climate change. And to frame the conversation that we're in, it's about people, it's about water, especially when I'm going to show you a few slides here in regards to the ocean and the hydrology that's going on the planet. So water is life, and the Climate Reality Project really starts showing you globally what's going on in water. And it's frightening. But I guess at this point we need to be frightened to take effective action. And that's to make the change, because it's got to be a change of behaviors, a change of how we're relating to one another, how we are relating to the web of life, and how we are seeing our future together. Because we are in a moment of truth where if we don't wake up, the cataclysmic crisis that we're in is really something to be alarmed about. So this put a price on carbon is a millennial movement that is occurring in universities across the country. So I would say do it here. Get hooked up with the universities around the country. Spearhead, put a price on carbon right here at the college, and get your administration and your council to agree. The citizens' climate lobby is like local going global, and this is in every district in the United States. So, if you don't have that connection yet, you will find a lot of allies, a lot of new friends in this citizens' climate lobby. Okay? Okay, this Climate Leadership Council is the thing that I'm actually the most shocked and in awe about. And this is Baker, Paulson, and Schultz, who were previous secretaries of Treasury and also secretaries of state, a couple of them, who have created this Climate Leadership Council, and they're the ones that are spearheading this notion of the carbon fee dividend that I've articulated. And then finally, there's the Congressional Climate Caucus that is just getting started. And there, this caucus, you have to have a Republican and a Democrat come together to be on the caucus. So it's very interesting. And I think this is going to start spinning. I think that there's going to be more of this unity coming together in regards to climate change, and you're going to see congressmen and eventually senators that are going to start agreeing that we have a serious problem. And in regards to why I know that is that when I saw the presentation of a Rear Admiral, David Titley, who had been in the Navy for 32 years, and sometime I'm going to put it up so that you see his distinctions of how serious it is. The cost to the military, climate change is going to be a significant cost to bases worldwide. And it's also going to be a significant cost to corporations. You know, like Houston is in serious trouble. And we have a lot of oil sitting down there that can be easily in the Gulf with the water problem on their way. So the Climate Reality Project, I really invite you to participate. And this is a slide where the energy trap by man-made global warming pollution is now equivalent to 400,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs per day, 365 days a year. Is that amazing? So, anyway, thank you for your attention, and I'm certainly open to any questions or comments. Anybody?
Has anybody looked in the financial stability of something like that, and how, like a 10-year program? Look over 10 years of getting the dividend?
Yeah. So the carbon fee dividend, right? I think that it is really a confrontation between we the citizens and this taken for granted energy policy that we kind of parachuted into as citizens that really needs disrupted. You know, you cannot just eliminate fossil fuels like that, because you would literally destroy the global economy, right? But this carbon fee dividend is the most intelligent way in business where we actually start putting the cost of what the carbon is and into the equation of the global economy and start making decisions as citizens in regards to what we want and how we want to construct our future behaviors and renewable energy and full employment and stuff like that.
Well, I guess my main question is who's in charge of that money? Because that's a lot of money to, you know, the rich might get richer with that money, the poor will get poorer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the thing that we have to guard against, huh? Is to almost keep it out of the government's hands, because anything, you know, the idea that because you have money and you have the gold that you make the rules in the game, well, I believe that is really the shift that's going to happen. And what happens with the carbon fee dividend is that the benefits come down to the bottom of the pyramid, the people that are the poorest with the smallest ecological footprint, taking, you know, public transportation and so on and so forth. They actually see the benefit in terms of the revenue. Whereas at the very top of the pyramid, there's kind of a wake up that happens up there, where if you have 10 pieces of property and you know, you do have your own plane and all this, you know, all this wealth, well, you start paying for the energy consumption. So your ecological footprint, you become aware of it pretty quickly. Does that make sense?
I feel like, I mean, me myself, I agree with a carbon tax, but
No, don't say tax.
I mean like a carbon
Fee.
fee, right?
The reason why I say that is that if you say tax in Washington D.C.,
It creates
you
a-
could be killed.
Yeah.
Okay?
I mean, I agree with it, but it's just like, I feel like everyone else, the initial, be a lot of pushback and like resentment. Like, essentially it is like a sin tax. Like, I used to live in New Zealand and, you know, they upped the tax on cigarettes. It didn't stop people from, well, maybe decrease a little bit of people smoking cigarettes, but mostly just created, you know, resentment and sort of like a, what do you call it? I don't want to say hatred, but dislike of the government and like anyone who creates those policies. And you know, there's like the whole like narrative going on. I don't want to say like conservative, but like on the right that, you know, like this is my money and no one else deserves it pretty much. That sort of thing that's going on.
Right.
So
You're gonna get pushback by the corporations too.
yeah, mostly, I mean,
Yeah, because they emit a lot of carbon. They're gonna fight tooth and nail.
they're the ones who have like the money to
Yeah.
change this.
You may be surprised. I'm just saying
Oh, yeah.
that there's 70% of the American population today that wants some action on climate change, okay? So that 10 years ago, that was not the case. So in the last 11 years, no matter what you think of Al Gore, and I'm not Republican or Democrat, I hate everybody. I'm not prejudiced. My comment is, I'm not prejudiced. I hate everybody. And when you get into this carbon fee dividend, what you may find is the Democrats are the ones that may be putting on the brake. You know, so part of the conversation with the carbon fee dividend is we don't want the money to go into the same bureaucratic trap or swamp in Washington, D.C. What we actually want is a very clean program where everyone agrees that for insurance purposes, you know, even to the deniers of climate change, but what if there's a 1% chance of this happening and it's going to affect Koch brothers and everybody? You know, maybe it's worth taking the insurance policy out at this point. And so, you know, there's a whole nother conversation that we can have around how inefficient our energy production is and the way that we're doing it, which always brings me to like thinking of Pine Ridge like as ground zero. And, you know, so your culture prior to 1492 and the Europeans coming in, there was this stable culture that existed for thousands of years, over 10,000 or more years. And then all of a sudden it had this inflection point where Europe came over, and there was the creation of poverty really, in my assessment, really occurred through the European form of governance. And so, you know, your little village here, which is little compared to, you know, like New York City, or, you know, you're not Bangladesh with 250 million people that are going underwater. And even more than that, you're kind of in a safe location compared to, you know, I'd be counting my blessings if I, you know, that's one of the reasons why I come here, is that I really enjoy the Black Hills, and and the Great Plains. And when you go out at night, it seems like the stars are closer for some reason.
We actually see them.
Yeah, yeah. And so the thing of it is that even though there's, you know, some dysfunctional fragmentation that's occurred over the last couple hundred years, you still have contact with your root, and you know the possibility of becoming like a 100% renewable solar village, you know, is very possible, man. You know, like I'm getting ready to stop driving my car. Yeah, I really don't need a car in Washington, D.C. because this Uber, Uber. This Uber is so cool, man. I mean, like, you know, they pick you up within 5 minutes, and if you're willing to share a ride, so, you know, in Washington, D.C., whenever I leave the home, I call them, and they come and right up to pick me up, and you know, I always hit the cheapest one, which is, you know, I don't mind sharing on my way downtown, and it like it only cost me like $2, or you know, almost nothing, and the you know, and then I get to meet people too because they get in and then everyone's talking. So you know, I was thinking about it. Like transportation up here is such an issue, right? And it'd be cool if you guys organized, you know, your Uber, you know, and
you know, they kind of have that Uber system within the college, but they don't pay. Each district, each college center except Pine Ridge and like Rapid City, they have a van, and they take the students to classes that are not in the college centers, but they don't have to pay. But it's kind of an Uber system. You know, they pick them up at the center and take them.
yeah,
So that's kind of cool.
yeah.
And that's a new thing, and that's kind of cool for the smaller centers and stuff, especially helping. It cuts down on gas vouchers, because before they used to have this gas voucher system, and the students would go and request a gas voucher to go to class in Kyle or something like that.
Right.
And now they have the little vans that take them around.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, so I guess in closing, is anyone here interested in doing a day with the climate change reality program and kind of get certified on these slides and be able to be a voice for it for the Lakota? One? Hey, that's great. Thank you. Hey, what's your name?
Tashina.
Tashina?
Now, if Misty offered some credit.
Well, I'm saying that this is for anybody, and it really. So even if you're not interested, if you find anyone in your community, your grandmother, your grandfather, brother, sister, someone in business, any of your relatives or friends, you know, we would like to bring a certification or whatever it is, the training here, to be able to get the Lakota voice into the conversation. Is anyone here interested in the university action of millennials of putting a price on carbon?
So is it like doing stuff on like college campuses to?
Yeah. No, well, I'm just saying this would be networking, you know, and I'll get you in touch with the people that are running it, but it would be like, yeah, no, it'd be like you'd be with Harvard and different universities out there that are, but you would create your own little team here and then take it to the, I guess the Tom Short Bowl and the Elder Council, and then eventually you take, you know, once you get that step, then you can go to your Ogallala tribal government and say, this is what we, you know, we want you to sign on here. Does that make sense? Is anybody going to join the Citizens Climate Lobby? No?
Oh, we have to look into it and read it.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what, I will, I promise to, I just got here last Friday. I'm only here for a couple weeks, and but I'll be sure to give Misty something, a handout that will give you the links and everything. Or I'll tell you what, I'll just get it to you by email. How's that sound?
Cool.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.